Inside Crescent Trust Bank, federal agent Elena Brooks is slammed against the counter, handcuffed in front of stunned customers, accused of cashing a fake check. The irony? The check funds a justice center in her late father's name. The cameras roll. Officers ignore her ID. And within minutes, the woman who fights corruption becomes its latest victim. What happens next will shake the entire city.
If this moment felt intense, prepare yourself, because what comes next is darker, more dangerous, and far more powerful than anything you've seen so far. Subscribe to Black Battles and hit the bell icon so you never miss our latest powerful stories.
The morning sun crept through the blinds of Elena Brooks's apartment, scattering golden light across the framed photographs lining her bookshelf. Most of them showed her father, Daniel Brooks, a man known in the neighborhood as the voice of fairness. He had spent decades mentoring young people, helping ex-offenders reintegrate, and fighting for racial equality long before it became a headline. Today, Elena was following in his footsteps, in her own way. As a senior federal investigator with the Bureau of Civil Integrity, she had built her career uncovering corruption in law enforcement and finance. But this morning wasn't about work. It was personal. She was preparing to deposit a check, a six-figure settlement that would fund the Brooks Center for Technology and Justice, community hub to honor her father's dream of empowering underprivileged youth through education and technology. The check wasn't just money. It was her father's legacy and the culmination of years of sacrifice. Elena stood by the window sipping black coffee, her reflection calm yet distant. Outside, the city of Rivergate stirred awake, cars honking, vendors opening their stands, and joggers passing by with earbuds and determination. For everyone else, it was an ordinary Thursday. For Elena, it felt like the beginning of something greater. Before leaving, she glanced at her father's old wristwatch on the shelf, still ticking, faintly scratched, but unbroken. She fastened it around her wrist, whispered, "For you, Dad," and stepped out the door. The streets of downtown Rivergate glowed under the late morning sun. Elena walked briskly, her neatly pressed blazer reflecting her usual precision. Yet something in the air felt off. Not ominous, but heavy, like a prelude to rain before a storm. Crescent Trust Bank stood at the corner of Main and Fifth, a modern building with tinted glass and a reputation for exclusivity. Elena had been there a few times before. The staff had always been polite, even distant, but today she carried a check so large it could buy half the block. She rehearsed her explanation in her mind. Federal grant settlement, nonprofit fund, community project, simple, legitimate, transparent. But as she pushed open the glass doors, she couldn't shake the faint unease crawling at the back of her neck. Inside, the air smelled faintly of sanitizer and polished wood. Only a few customers were in line. Elena stepped up to the counter, where a young teller with auburn hair, Sarah Miller, greeted her with a practiced smile. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you today?" "I'd like to deposit this," Elena said, sliding the envelope forward. Sarah opened it, her smile faltering slightly as her eyes landed on the number. Her fingers hesitated on the keyboard. "Oh, wow, that's quite a check," she said, forcing a laugh. Elena offered a polite nod. "It's for a nonprofit project. The funds were released this week." Sarah blinked, clearly uncomfortable. "Of course. Could you wait just a moment? I'll need to have our branch manager take a quick look." Elena frowned slightly. "Sure, no problem." She watched as Sarah hurried toward a glass office where Patricia Harlow, the branch manager, stood talking to a security guard. The two women exchanged words, then both turned to look at Elena. Patricia's expression was tight, polite but suspicious. She walked over, her heels clicking sharply against the tile. "Ms. Brooks, is it?" "That's right," Elena replied. "May I ask the source of this check?" Patricia asked, her tone measured but probing. "It's from a federal settlement fund. I'm with the Bureau of Civil Integrity. You can verify it easily." Patricia smiled, but it was the kind of smile people use when they don't believe you. "Of course. Just standard protocol. We'll need to verify before processing." Elena nodded slowly, though irritation flickered behind her calm eyes. As Patricia turned away with the check, Elena noticed the guard glance at her, not casually, but like he was memorizing her face. A cold realization began to settle in her chest. Something wasn't right. and she had no idea that this routine deposit was about to spiral into the fight of her life. Patricia Harlow disappeared into her office with the check, leaving Elena standing in the middle of the bank lobby. The air had changed, no longer neutral, but thick with unspoken tension. A mother holding her toddler glanced over her shoulder. Two businessmen near the counter whispered, pretending not to. Elena shifted her weight and folded her arms. She'd been in interrogation rooms quieter than this. Her instincts, sharp, honed by years of federal work, whispered that something was off. She looked toward the glass office. Patricia was on the phone, gesturing with tight, quick movements. The guard, a heavy-set man with Cliff stitched on his uniform, stood nearby with one hand resting on his belt, close to his holster. Elena exhaled slowly. She had faced cartel suspects, corrupt politicians, and undercover busts that could have gone either way. Yet here she was, in her own city, being studied like a suspect for trying to deposit a legitimate check. A few minutes later, Patricia emerged with a strained smile. "Ms. Brooks, thank you for waiting. We're just having a little issue confirming the check. Sometimes large deposits take a few minutes." Elena nodded, keeping her tone professional. "No problem. I can provide contact details for verification." Patricia hesitated, just long enough for the words to sound hollow. "Oh, that won't be necessary. We've already contacted the issuing institution." Elena's brow furrowed. "You called the bank? Without even checking with me?" Patricia's smile thinned. "We just follow procedure, ma'am. Large deposits of this nature raise automatic flags." "Of this nature," Elena repeated softly, her voice cutting through the silence. She'd heard those coded words before. Of this nature. It was the kind of phrase that meant you don't look like you belong here. The conversation was interrupted when Cliff, the guard, spoke into his radio, quietly. But Elena caught the words, "Yeah, she's still here." Something inside her twisted. "Excuse me," she said, stepping closer to the counter. "Is there a problem I should know about?" Patricia's expression remained fixed. "Just stay right where you are, Ms. Brooks. Everything's under control." The front doors opened, and two police officers walked in. Their boots echoed on the tile like a drumbeat. Elena's heartbeat slowed, steady and cold. The lead officer, Sergeant Tom Harlan, was tall, middle-aged, with a hard jaw and mirrored sunglasses that reflected the whole room back at itself. His partner, Officer Dwayne Keller, trailed behind, hand resting on his taser. Patricia hurried toward them. "Officers, thank you for coming so quickly." "That's her," Elena blinked. "That's who?" Tom turned to her. "Ma'am, we've received a report of a possible fraudulent transaction. I'm going to need to see some ID." Elena pulled a slim leather wallet from her blazer and held up her badge. "Federal Bureau of Civil Integrity. I'm the complainant here, not the suspect." "That check is completely valid." Tom didn't even look at the badge. "We'll sort that out downtown." Elena's pulse spiked. "You're making a serious mistake. Verify the account number, call my office." But Dwayne was already stepping closer, his tone flat. "Ma'am, please place your hands on the counter." People had started filming. Phones lifted in trembling hands. The low hum of the air conditioner was drowned out by whispers. Elena tried again, calm but firm. "You're detaining a federal agent for trying to deposit a check. Think about what you're doing." Tom's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, you're obstructing an investigation." Before she could respond, he grabbed her wrist. The sharp click of metal filled the air. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Are you serious?" Someone shouted. "She didn't do anything." Another voice echoed. Elena didn't resist, but her eyes locked on Patricia's face, cold and composed, as if she'd just checked another task off her list. As the officers led Elena toward the door, her badge dangled from her hand, proof of who she was. Ignored and unseen. She glanced once more at the ceiling cameras. Record everything, she thought, because when the truth came out, this moment would destroy them all. The moment the cold steel of the handcuffs snapped around Elena's wrists, the entire bank froze. Time seemed to stall. Every sound, every breath, every heartbeat hanging in disbelief. Officer Harlan pulled her hands behind her back, forcing her slightly forward against the marble counter. Her briefcase slid from her grasp and hit the floor with a hollow thud. Papers spilling out, blueprints, letters, and one old photograph of her father. "Officer, Please, Elena started, but Harlan cut her off. You have the right to remain silent, he said mechanically, his voice carrying that mixture of boredom and arrogance that comes from too many unchecked badges. Elena could hear the gasps around her. A teenage boy whispered to his mother, "But she said she's an agent." Phones were out now and recording, flashing, documenting. The teller, Sarah Miller, stood frozen behind her station. Her lips parted in horror. "Sir, I think there's been a mistake." "Step back, miss," Dwayne barked, pointing toward her. "This doesn't concern you." Elena lifted her head, her dark eyes sharp with fury and humiliation. "You're making the biggest mistake of your careers," she said through gritted teeth. "Call your captain now." But Harlan just tightened his grip. "You can tell that to the desk sergeant." The crowd began murmuring, some angry, others afraid. One man yelled, "She didn't resist." "What are you doing?" Dwayne turned to him. "Sir, step away or you'll be detained for obstruction." The tension snapped like an electric wire. Elena could feel her pulse racing, her heart thudding painfully against her ribs. Her mind screamed, "Stay calm." Years of federal training whispered inside her head. "Control your breathing. Assess the situation. Don't give them more ammunition." But she couldn't silence the fire in her chest, not this time. "Do you even know who I am?" she demanded. "I am federal. You're violating procedure, civil code, and human decency all in one move." Her voice echoed across the marble lobby, but it only made the scene worse. A customer in the corner began live streaming. "They're arresting a federal agent in Rivergate," he narrated breathlessly. "This is insane." Sarah finally stepped out from behind the counter, shaking. "Mrs. Brooks didn't do anything wrong. That check was from a verified account." Patricia Harlow appeared again, pretending calm authority. "Sarah, please. Let the officers handle it." Elena turned, eyes blazing. "You did this. You made the call." Patricia didn't answer. She just looked away, the faintest trace of guilt flickering before vanishing behind her professional mask. The officers began walking Elena toward the glass doors. Cameras followed. Outside, the flashing red and blue lights painted her reflection across the glass. A reflection she barely recognized. A respected agent paraded like a criminal. The reporters hadn't arrived yet, but the crowd was already gathering. Workers from nearby shops, pedestrians, people who had seen the live stream within minutes. As Harlan pushed open the door, Elena turned her head slightly toward a bystander filming her and said, "Clear and steady. Make sure you get all of this. Every second. Because the truth has a way of finding light." The words hit like a spark in dry grass. Within hours, the footage would explode across every major platform. Justice for Elena would trend before sunset. And the entire country would be asking the same question. How does a federal agent end up in handcuffs for cashing a legitimate check? But for now, as the car door slammed shut and the sirens began to wail, Elena stared out the window, her wrists burning, her pride fractured, and whispered to herself, "This isn't the end. It's the beginning," because she knew one thing better than anyone else. When corruption hides behind power, the only weapon strong enough to fight it is the truth. By the next morning, the entire country knew her name. Elena Brooks, a decorated federal agent, wash and cuffed like a criminal for trying to cash a donation check. The video had gone viral overnight, clipped, shared, reposted millions of times. The footage captured her calm defiance, the tremor in her voice when she said, "Make sure you get all of this," and the shock of the onlookers as she was dragged away by 2 local officers. Every major network ran the story on a loop. Headlines blazed, "Federal agent arrested for being right," "Bank discrimination or police misconduct," "Crescent Trust faces national backlash." Commentators argued over the clip on morning shows. Protesters gathered outside Crescent Trust branches in half a dozen states. And on social media, hashtags multiplied like wildfire. Justice for Elena, Crescent cover-up, no more badges, above law in her small apartment. Sarah Miller, the teller who'd tried to defend Elena, watched the chaos unfold on TV. Her stomach twisted with guilt. She'd told her manager the truth, but Patricia Harlow had buried the report. Now the world knew what really happened. and Sarah feared retaliation. Still, she couldn't stay silent. She opened her phone, hit record, and said quietly, "My name is Sarah Miller. I work at Crescent Trust Bank, and everything you saw in that video is true." That clip, shaky, sincere, trembling with courage, became the next viral wave. Within hours, Sarah's video hit 5 million views. Meanwhile, in the downtown police precinct, Captain Avery Torres slammed his coffee down and glared at Officers Harlan and Duane. "You two better start talking," he barked. "Because Washington just called my office asking why one of their agents spent the night in our holding cell." Harlan tried to sound confident. "She was belligerent, sir. Claimed she was federal. We had no verification and no verification." Torres interrupted, slamming a file onto the table. "You arrested a woman with a federal ID and an active bureau badge. Did you even look at it?" Silence. Duane swallowed hard. "We thought it was fake, sir." Torres leaned forward, eyes blazing. "You thought wrong. And now every news camera in America is parked outside this building. Congratulations. You just became the face of modern policing's worst nightmare." Across town, Elena sat quietly in her apartment, freshly released but far from free. Reporters camped outside her door. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Her phone buzzed nonstop with messages from journalists, politicians, and even fellow agents. She hadn't asked for this war, but she wasn't backing down from it either. Her attorney, Miles Carter, sat across from her. "Elena, this isn't just a wrongful arrest case anymore. It's a national symbol. You've got civil rights groups, media outlets, and even senators demanding hearings. You ready for that kind of spotlight?" Elena looked up, her expression steady. "I didn't start this. But if it forces the system to answer for what it's done, then I'm not running from it." That night, Elena went live on social media for the first time. Her voice was calm, her eyes unwavering. "I've spent my life upholding the law. Yesterday, that same law turned against me. But this isn't about me anymore. It's about every person who's been silenced, dismissed, or humiliated for no reason except someone's prejudice or power trip. We can't fix what we won't face," millions watched. Millions believed her. And somewhere inside Crescent Trust Bank, Patricia Harlow watched too, her hands trembling as her phone rang. It was the corporate office. They wanted answers. The battle for truth had begun. The scandal had cracked open, but Elena knew the truth ran deeper than one humiliating arrest. Crescent Trust wasn't just guilty of racism. Something far more calculated was happening behind its polished glass doors. A week after her release, Elena sat in her dimly lit home office, stacks of files spread across the table. The check that sparked her arrest lay at the center, now cleared and verified by the Bureau's financial division. It wasn't fraudulent. It was part of a community revitalization grant meant to rebuild the tech center her late father had dreamed of. Yet Crescent Trust had flagged it as suspicious. Why? Her partner, Miles Carter, dropped a thick folder in front of her. "We got something," he said. Turns out Crescent's been quietly rejecting large deposits made to minority-owned initiatives. Not just yours, dozens of them. Churches, startups, nonprofits, all flagged for compliance concerns that never existed. Elena's jaw tightened. "So they're laundering discrimination through policy." Miles nodded grimly. "Exactly. And there's more. A whistleblower inside the bank sent me encrypted files, donation records that don't add up. Money from charity foundations vanishes into consulting accounts. Guess who signed off on them?" Elena flipped through the pages. The signature was unmistakable. Patricia Harlow, the same manager who'd called the police on her. "Patricia's hiding something," Elena murmured. "But who's protecting her?" Miles pulled out another document. Assistant District Attorney Trent Marbury. He's been quietly approving Crescent's internal cases. Every time a discrimination claim was filed, it ended up dismissed under his name. A chill swept through the room. Marbury wasn't just any official. He was a political rising star, known for his clean reformist image. His connection meant the corruption extended beyond the bank. It was systemic, stitched into the very institutions meant to uphold justice. That night, Elena met with Reverend Leah Monroe, a longtime community leader and her father's old friend. They sat in the church basement, surrounded by posters demanding equality. "Your father fought men like this his whole life," Leah said softly. He always said corruption doesn't wear a mask, it wears a smile. Elena sighed. And now it's wearing a suit and a badge. Laya placed a hand on her shoulder. Then you do what he did. You shine a light on it. By morning, Elena and Miles began building their case. They traced the fraudulent accounts, uncovered hidden transfers, and cross-referenced victims, people whose grants were denied without explanation. Each file revealed the same pattern: rejection, dainties, and buried paperwork. Then came the most shocking discovery: a single encrypted, folder-labeled Project Falcon. It contained dozens of internal memos between Crescent Trust executives and city officials discussing plans to redirect community grant money into private development projects. Low-income displacement, one document called it. Urban renewal zones, another. In plain language, they were stealing from struggling communities and selling the land to corporate investors, erasing the very neighborhoods Elena's father had fought to protect. She leaned back, overwhelmed by fury and disbelief. This isn't just corruption, she whispered. It's theft. It's betrayal. Miles looked up from his laptop. If we leak this, the whole city explodes. Elena met his eyes. Good. Maybe that's exactly what needs to happen. Outside, the sun was rising, soft light breaking through storm clouds. But for Crescent Trust Bank, a darker storm was coming. Elena uploaded the first set of documents to an encrypted drive labeled "For Justice." Her next step was clear. It was time to bring the truth to light, even if it meant risking everything. The morning of the rally arrived like the calm before a storm. Downtown Crescent City was alive. Hundreds of people gathered in front of Crescent Trust Bank, carrying handmade signs that read, "Justice for Elena Brooks. Accountability now. End the corruption." Camera crews lined the sidewalks. Reporters shouted questions. The air was thick with anticipation and tension. Elena stood behind the makeshift stage, her FBI badge clipped to her jacket, but her expression stripped of all formality. She wasn't there as an agent today. She was there as a daughter, a woman wronged and a voice for everyone who had been silenced. Beside her, Miles Carter adjusted the microphone. "They're ready for you," he said quietly. "The city's watching, Elena. So is the country." Elena took a deep breath, the weight of her father's memory pressing on her heart. She stepped forward and the crowd erupted in cheers and chants. She waited for the noise to fade, then spoke, her voice steady, but charged with emotion. "Last month I walked into this bank tow deposit in my father's name, a man who spent his life building bridges for others. Instead, I was treated like a criminal. I was arrested for daring to exist in a space where some people still believe I don't belong." The crowd roared with anger and support. Cameras flashed. "But this isn't just about me," she continued, her tone tightening. "This is about every person who's been denied, dismissed, or disrespected by a system that values prejudice over proof. And we've learned something. Crescent Trust wasn't just complicit. They were profiting from discrimination." Gasps rippled through the audience. Miles stepped forward, holding up printed documents, the leaked Project Falcon files. "These are internal memos," he said into the microphone, "proving that Crescent Trust and city officials redirected community development funds to private investors, all while denying legitimate grants to minority organizations." Reporters scrambled to capture photos. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Then, from the far end of the street came the low rumble of police vehicles. A line of officers in riot gear formed across the plaza. Their helmets gleamed under the morning sun. "Here we go," Miles muttered. Captain Torres, the same officer who had reprimanded Harlan and Dwayne, walked toward Elena, his expression tense. "Agent Brooks, I suggest you disperse this crowd before things escalate." Elena faced him squarely. "Captain, this is a peaceful assembly. You can't silence people demanding justice. You're inciting a disturbance," he said, gesturing to the officers behind him. "No, Captain," she replied. "We're exposing one." The crowd began chanting louder. "No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace." Torres hesitated, torn between orders and conscience. But then another figure approached. Assistant District Attorney Trent Marbury, his usual smile replaced with unease. Cameras turned toward him. "Ada Marbury," a reporter shouted. Do you deny your involvement in Project Falcon? Marbury adjusted his tie, his voice faltering. I have no comment at this time. Elena held up one of the leaked memos. Then let me refresh your memory, she said, her voice ringing through the speakers. Your signature is right here, authorizing the transfer of community funds into shell accounts tied to private developers. You didn't just ignore corruption, Mr. Marbury. You signed it. The crowd gasped again, and then the chants turned into thunder. Arrest him! Arrest him! Police tension grew thick. A single officer stepped forward, raising his baton. But before he could act, a convoy of black SUVs pulled up. Doors opened, and federal agents stepped out, flashing Department of Justice credentials. The lead agent, a woman in a dark suit, announced into a bullhorn, "This rally is now under federal jurisdiction. Stand down, local enforcement. We have warrants for multiple individuals connected to Crescent Trust and Project Falcon." Shock rippled through the officers. Captain Torres lowered his weapon slowly. Marbury tried to back away, but two agents stopped him, reading him his rights as cameras recorded every word. The crowd erupted in cheers. Raw, stoppable energy filling the square. Elena exhaled, tears stinging her eyes as she watched justice unfold in real time. For the first time since that humiliating day in the bank, she felt her father's presence, as though he were standing right beside her. Reverend Leah Monroe stepped up onto the stage and took the microphone. "This," she said, her voice trembling with pride, "is what happens when truth refuses to stay buried. When courage speaks louder than fear." The chant returned, louder than ever. "Justice for all! Justice for all!" Elena closed her eyes and whispered softly, "We're just getting started." Above the bank, storm clouds gathered, not of destruction, but of change. The days that followed the rally were a blur of headlines, hearings, and long overdue accountability. Federal agents swarmed Crescent Trust's corporate offices, seizing records and freezing accounts. Executives resigned one by one, and the once proud bank's name became a symbol of greed and systemic corruption. Assistant District Attorney Trent Marbury was indicted for conspiracy and fraud. Patricia Harlow, the branch manager who had called the police on Elena, broke down during questioning, her voice shaking as she confessed to years of covering up discriminatory practices in exchange for bonuses and promotions. It was the kind of reckoning the city hadn't seen in decades. Elena Brooks, now standing before a row of microphones at the courthouse steps, wasn't there as a victim. She was there as a voice for everyone who had been wronged and silenced. "The truth," she said, her tone calm but firm, "has a way of finding its way to the surface, no matter how deep you try to bury it. This victory isn't just mine. It belongs to every person who ever walked into a place of power and was made to feel small. Today, we proved that justice still works when courage refuses to quit." The crowd cheered. Reporters shouted her name, but beneath the flash of cameras, Elena's gaze was distant, fixed on the memory of her father. Later that evening, she returned to the old brick community building her father once dreamed of transforming into a tech and justice center. Now, for the first time, it was real, funded legally, protected by law, and named in his honor, the Ellison Brooks Center for Justice and Innovation. Inside, workers painted the walls while children peeked curiously through the doors. Elena walked slowly through the halls, her heels echoing softly against the polished floor. A plaque near the entrance read, "For those who dared to stand when silence was easier." Reverend Leah Monroe met her inside, smiling warmly. "You did it," she said. Elena shook her head. "We did it. My father laid the foundation. The community carried the fight. I just lit the match," Leah laughed gently. "You lit more than that, child. You set fire to the whole system. And now maybe something better can grow from the ashes." Meanwhile, Captain Avery Torres, one of the few officers who had stood for the truth, was appointed head of a new civil accountability task force. He called Elena personally that night. "You gave the city something it lost a long time ago," he said. "Faith," Elena smiled faintly. "Faith doesn't belong to me, Captain. It belongs to everyone who refuses to stop fighting." The following week, as the sun rose over Crescent City, Elena walked once more into Crescent Trust Bank, now under new management. Its walls repainted, its staff retrained. The atmosphere was calmer, almost humbled. A young teller greeted her nervously. "Good morning, Agent Brooks. It's an honor to have you here." Elena smiled kindly. "Just Elena today." She handed over a new check, one made out to the Ellison Brooks Center for Justice and Innovation. The teller nodded and began the transaction. There was no suspicion this time, no hesitation, just quiet respect. As the machine confirmed the deposit, Elena turned toward the window, watching the light spill through the glass. The city outside was noisy, alive, unpredictable, but somehow it felt different. Miles entered behind her, leaning against the counter. "So what now?" he asked. Elena glanced over, a quiet determination in her eyes. "Now we build, we teach, and we make sure no one ever goes through what I did." He nodded slowly. "You really think one center can change all that?" Elena looked down at the deposit receipt in her hand. Her father's dream finally realized. "One center can't change the world," she said softly, "but it can light the path for those who will." Outside, the crowd that once protested now cheered as children painted a mural on the side of the new Justice Center. Bright colors, open hands, and the words, "Truth is stronger than power." Elena paused for a moment, letting the breeze wash over her face. The same city that once watched her humiliation now stood with her in victory. She smiled, whispered a quiet prayer for her father, and walked away, ready for whatever came next. Because the fight for justice was never over. It was only the beginning. They tried to break her spirit. Instead, she rebuilt the system.